A lot of people are wondering what separates the best from just an average resume. And that's what I really want to talk about here today because 75% of people out there right now, their resumes are just ending up in the trash can. And your resume is really critical to your job search because if you can't punch through and really get your resume noticed, your job search isn't going to go anywhere. And so many people start out in their job searches and they're like, let me get my resume out there. I want to start shopping my resume. And they start sending it out on LinkedIn, Indeed, and all these different career websites. But if you don't have the right resume to start with, then it's really putting the cart before the horse, and you can really spend a ton of time and a ton of energy shopping a resume that's never going to produce any return. And obviously, I want you to see returns in your job search, and I want it to be fruitful, and I want you to do a great job and land the position that you want. So I'm going to show you a couple different copies of great resumes here, and I'm going to show you several different resumes that are not so great. So one of the biggest things when it comes to resume, just 3 tips here that can really help you in your career search when it comes to resumes, is layouts and visuals matter. So hiring managers and recruiters, once they do get your resume, they're going to be looking at it and they're going to be judging a book by its cover. There's the old saying, well, don't ever judge a book by its cover, and don't pay attention to people who do. Well, I can tell you one thing, when it comes to job searches and when it comes to hiring managers and recruiters, they are definitely judging a book by its cover. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if it really doesn't speak value to them, they're not going to explore you as a candidate. And they're looking at your resume for about 7 seconds max. And it's like, does this speak value or does it not? And so here's a resume right here that was sent to me. I evaluate people's resumes, and this was sent in to me. This was a person who wanted some critique, and so I'll just put this up here. And the first thing I noticed, this person is a director at an airline, and I've blacked out their name obviously here for confidentiality reasons. But the initial thing that I shared with this person is there's a lot of white space on the page, and they haven't used proper resume formatting. This is way bigger than a 12 size font Times New Roman. There's really no information about this position that they held as a retail stockbroker. They're bolding out all of these titles. But the thing that I noticed first was this is a lot of white space on this resume, and this person doesn't know how to represent their value properly. And so as a hiring manager, this would end up in the trash can. This would be completely discarded. So that's just one example of a resume. And that's just the first thing that I'm talking about here, which is layout and visuals matter. And it took me maybe a second to decide that. So instantly when I saw that resume, I was like, I would throw this in the trash can. And that may not sound nice, but that's the truth. And it's a very, very judgmental process, the hiring process. They're trying to judge whether this candidate is going to be the right person for the company. And so let's just go to the next resume here. This is another resume that was sent in. Obviously, I've blacked out the contact information for this person, but this is a little bit better. Again, we have a lot of white space still at the top. They could have definitely condensed this information down into about 3 lines. Instead, they took about 5 to 6 lines if you include that space. Great job with the summary up top. They go right into their education. Education should be right at the bottom. And they go into their experience here, which is pretty good. They put the bullet points in here. I would not use that big of bullet points. They've expressed some quantities, but the bullet points really need to be longer. This is really just 7 words is really not enough. So that's some of my takeaways on this. Education always needs to be at the bottom. There could be a lot more information provided here in terms of the value and the results that they drove at the company. So again, that resume would also probably end up in the trash. This is a little bit better. And this person formerly was at Hewlett Packard as a global marketing lead. And they've got a nice short condensed header here that has their contact information on 2 lines. This is pretty good. They then have their value proposition here at the top. Some people call this the summary. You can see that this has a lot more meat and potatoes on the actual resume. You can see that this person knows how to present their value a little bit better than the first couple candidates that I showed you here. They go into their professional experience. We've got some bullet points that have got some really great meat on the bone. They're expressing quantities here all throughout, $100 million. What do we have here? Achieved up to 34% open rates and 13% click-through rates. So they're quantifying everything, which is so important. They could have done a little bit better here with putting their core competencies. They only expressed three of those on each line for a total of 6. I like to see at least 12. So this is pretty good. They're taking up most of the page with their words and content. It's really nice and clean, nice meaty sections here. And then the next page also looks fantastic. I need to cover up the top because it's the person's name. But they did the same thing at the bottom. They're listing certifications, languages, and tools. And obviously up here they continued their theme of expressing their quantified results and achievement statements. Now, that's number 2. When it comes to a great resume, number 2 is you need to have achievement-based statements. And achievement-based statements are the bullet points specifically that I'm referring to and how you express the value that you provided your current employer or your previous employer. And in this section here specifically, you really want to go by a simple formula that really it's I accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z. And this needs to be expressed numerically. So a lot of people make the mistake of writing out their resume and it doesn't have any numbers expressed or quantities expressed in these bullet points. And if you've ever read a really long story and it didn't have any numbers, or if you read a long paragraph and there's no numbers, there's really nothing to hold on to and grasp onto that really sticks out. And you really want your successes and your achievements to stand out. And a great way to do that, obviously, is by quantifying what you've done. Now, just going back to this simple formula, accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z. Some people say, well, listen, I haven't really had that, I haven't made tremendous impacts at companies, or I haven't really done that much that really stands out. I can't really quantify something that way. You really can, even if you're working the drive-thru at McDonald's, for an example. And I have nothing against people who work the drive-thru at McDonald's. I did that when I was 16 years old for a number of years. But just to throw some examples out here of how do you quantify things in this formula way that I shared with you. So if you're a college student who's a leader of her sorority, so let's just start out with you manage the sorority budget. You could just put that on here, right? And it wouldn't really stick out. But what if you said it in the way that we're talking about in this, accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z formula? So we could spice it up a little bit more by saying managed a $31,000 spring 2014 budget and invested idle funds in appropriate high-yielding capital notes. So that's one example. And to take it up another level, to put in the by doing Z part, we could say managed $31,000 spring 2014 budget and invested $10,000 in idle funds and appropriate high-yielding capital notes, returning 5% over the year. So we're talking about the results that we've produced there. Now, this is a really powerful way to express your qualifications and your achievements. And I encourage you to do this with your bullet points, is to try to get them as on point as you can with expressing numbers and quantities. Now, I'm going to give you another example of this formula in practical use. So if the person was applying for a finance or consulting role, the dummied down version of a bullet point would be responsible for negotiating service contracts with XYZ company. Okay. Now, if we take it to the next level, negotiated 30% reduction in cost with XYZ to perform post-delivery support. And if we took it to the next level, it would be negotiated a 30% in turn $500,000 reduction in cost with XYZ to perform post-delivery support by designing and using results from an online auction of multiple vendors. So you can spice things up in your resume and these bullet points by just getting more creative with how you express your successes and your results that you've produced, either in your current role or with your previous employer. Now, I want to go on to the third thing that employers look for here in just a minute. And before I do that, let's just go over a couple more resumes. So this is a resume that was sent in to me by Linda. And Linda is a marketing specialist. And so one thing that I noticed here when it comes to Linda's resume is she's got a lot of white space. In terms of her skills here, she's posted probably, I would say 9 to 12 too many. She could have got away with about, actually I want to say 6 less. 6 to 8 less. Because this just takes up too much space, and people really don't want to see all of these different skills right off the bat. They want to see your experience, which she's kind of left toward the middle to the bottom of the page. Also, her name and her last name were so big here. It took up too much real estate. Hiring managers really want to see tight, compact, and concise resumes. And if there's a lot of white space, it really says you're not concise. So that's one other thing that she could have done better here. When it comes to her bullet points, she did a great job expressing some quantities down here, and her previous experience. She states Overstock.com, Staples, My Resource Library, other clients that she worked with, which will stand out to any employer. Going on to the back side of her resume, she did a pretty good job here filling out the page with some great content. She puts her education on the bottom, which is she's got that doctorate in business administration, which is impressive, a master's degree in science, and these are some impressive qualifications. But if Linda doesn't clean up this first page, that could be a disqualification right there from her candidacy at any company, just because this particular resume is not in the right format. So people are very discerning when they're going over these resumes, and you really have to have your resume at top fighting shape to really stand out as that candidate of choice. Now, this is a friend of mine who is a vice president at Johnson & Johnson. He's a worldwide vice president. This is his resume right here. This is I believe it's 3 pages. No, it's actually 4. So I haven't given him any feedback on this, but let's just take a dive into this. He keeps his credentials here and his contact information pretty short at the top. We've got a nice, concise summary of what he does and the type of value that he brings in the industry that he's in. We've got about 12 different core competencies listed here. Then he goes right into the meat and potatoes of what he's done in each one of these roles. And as we turn the page, we can definitely see that it's all about the meat and potatoes. And I would say this is probably a little bit too long, but he took up 4 lines with this particular summary here of what he's done. And it just goes down the page. If someone looks at this resume, they're going to know that he's provided a lot of value across the board with a lot of different companies. So this is a great resume. He's done an excellent job with this, and as he went down, he was expressing those quantities, and he was using those achievement-based statements. Now, I'll show you one more resume here, and this last resume is my favorite because the person really did a wonderful job on the visual layout, and they also did a wonderful job on the achievement-based statements. We can see here we've got areas of excellence. We've got their title that they're applying to right there above. The contact information was kept to a minimum, very concise. We can see from this resume here that there's essentially no space that was left unused. It's very concise, it's very tight, and this is a resume that I developed for this particular client of ours, and that's what we do at Hired & Company. We create executive resumes like this, and we do it not only for executives, but we do it for students, we do it for C-level managers and directors. And so we can see here also that The visuals here, we've got some blue, we've also got some black. Those are two great colors. We've expressed some career highlights in a window here, and we've also gone onto the back. We've got more qualifications expressed on this page. There's a little summary for each position that this person has held, and education is on the bottom. Almost zero white space on the page. Again, they've done a great job on the visual layout and also expressing those achievement-based statements. The other thing that was on that resume as well was a promotional history. If you have a promotional history with any company and you've been promoted 1, 2, 3, 4 times, you definitely want to do a great job demonstrating that on a resume, because number 3, companies look for candidates who have been promoted to bring into their company, because what it says if you've been promoted is that you've done a great job in the roles that you've already been in. So expressing that and clearly showing that in your resume and saying that in your interview is actually really important, and that will help you stand out. And there's some other things that go into creating a great resume, which you can find on our website, which is hiredandco.com. If you'd like us to make a resume for you, great. You can go to hiredandco.com. You can also check us out on our Facebook page, subscribe by clicking the link below, and I hope this has been helpful for you in knowing what stands out as far as a great resume versus just an average resume. Create a great resume and you're going to have more career success. Good luck.